to read to you from Little House in the Big Woods, our book that we've been reading, and we're on page 20. Mary was bigger than Laura, and she had a rag doll named Nettie. Laura had only a corncob wrapped in a handkerchief, but it was a good doll. It was named Susan. It wasn't Susan's fault that she was only a corncob. Sometimes Mary let Laura hold Nettie, but she did it only when Susan couldn't see. The best times of all were at night. After supper, Pa brought his traps in from the shed to grease them by the fire. He rubbed them bright and greased the hinges of the jaws and the springs of the pans with a feather dipped in bear's grease. So, remember we talked about how in the 1800s a lot of people made livings by selling fur, a lot of fur trappers, and that's what Pa does to earn money for his family. So he traps animals and then he goes to the store and trades the fur in and uses the fur instead of money to get any groceries or things that their family might need, like they might need new shoes or they might need fabric for to make their clothing. They are really pretty self-sufficient. They grow all the food they need, so the only reason they would need to go to the store is to buy things that they couldn't make themselves. There were small traps and middle-sized traps and great bear traps with teeth in their jaws that Pa said would break a man's leg if they shut onto it. While he greased the traps, Pa told Laura and Mary little jokes and stories, and afterward he would play his fiddle. The doors and windows were tightly shut, and the cracks of the window frames stuffed with cloth to keep out the cold. But Black Susan the cat came and went as she pleased, day and night, through the swinging door, the cat hole in the bottom of the front door. She always went very quickly so the door would not catch her tail when it fell shut behind her. One night, when Pa was greasing the traps, he watched Black Susan come in and he said, "There once was a man who had two cats, a big cat and a little cat." Laura and Mary ran to lean on his knees and hear the rest. "He had two cats," Pa repeated, "a big cat and a little cat. So he made a big cat hole in his door for the big cat, and then he made a little cat hole for the little cat." There Pa stopped. "But why couldn't the little cat," Mary began. "Because the big cat wouldn't let it," Laura interrupted. "Laura, that is very rude. You must never interrupt," said Pa. "But I see," he said, "that either one of you has more sense than the man who cut the two cat holes in his door." Then he laid away the traps and he took his fiddle out of its box and began to play. And that was the best time of all. So here is the picture of him cleaning his traps. Right? So he's a fur trapper, so those would they'd go on the ground, they would step on them and open them up so that the teeth were far apart from each other, and then they'd cover them with leaves, and then an animal would step into the trap and it would close, the jaws would close on the animal's leg, which was really kind of a super cheater, inhumane way of hunting and not very fair. But that's how Pa got them money for the things they needed. I think I'm going to start the next chapter for you. We probably won't finish it, but we'll get it started. It's called Winter Days and Winter Nights. And you can see a little bear heading off into the woods, the big woods. The first snow came and the bitter cold. Every morning Pa took his gun and his traps and was gone all day in the big woods, setting the small traps for muskrats and mink along the creeks, and middle-sized traps for foxes and wolves in the woods. He set out the big bear traps, hoping to get a fat bear before they all went into their dens for the winter. One morning he came back, took the horses and sled, and hurried away again. He had shot a bear. Laura and Mary jumped up and down and clapped their hands. They were so glad. Mary shouted, "I want the drumstick! I want the drumstick!" Mary did not know how big a bear's drumstick is. When Pa came back, he had both a bear and a pig in the wagon. He had been going through the woods with a big bear trap in his hands and the gun on his shoulder when he walked around a big pine tree covered with snow, and the bear was behind the tree. The bear had just killed the pig and was picking it up to eat it. Pa said the bear was standing up on its hind legs, holding the pig in its paws, just as though they were hands. Pa shot the bear, and there was no way of knowing where the pig came from, nor whose pig it was. So I just brought home the bacon, Pa said. There was plenty of fresh meat to last for a long time. This is the picture. Let's see if we can. I'm having a tough time with the glare. Can you guys see the bear holding the pig? If I hold it up really close. No? Yeah, maybe a little. Okay. The days and the nights were so cold that the pork in a box and the bear meat hanging in the little shed outside the back door were solidly frozen and did not thaw. When Ma wanted fresh meat for dinner, Pa took the axe and cut off a chunk of frozen bear meat or pork. But the sausage balls, or the salt pork, or the smoked hams and the venison, Ma could get for herself from the attic or the shed. The snow kept coming till it was drifted and banked against the house. In the morning, the window panes were covered with frost, in beautiful pictures of trees and flowers and fairies. Ma said that Jack Frost came in the night and made the pictures, while everyone was asleep. Laura thought that Jack Frost was a little man, all snowy white, wearing a glittering white pointed cap and soft white knee boots made of deerskin. His coat was white and his mittens were white, and he did not carry a gun on his back, but in his hands he had shining sharp tools with which he carved the pictures. Laura and Mary were allowed to take Ma's thimble and make pretty patterns of circles in the frost on the glass, but they never spoiled the pictures that Jack Frost had made in the night. When they put their mouths up close to the pane and blew their breath on it, the white frost melted and ran down in drops down the glass. Then they could see the drifts of snow outdoors and the great trees standing bare and black, making thin blue shadows on the white snow. Laura and Mary helped Ma with the work. Every morning there were dishes to wipe. So they didn't have sinks back then. You would go outside and you'd have a pump in the ground that would pump water out of a well in the ground. And then you would pump water into a bucket. And then you would take the bucket inside and you would wipe down your dishes. You'd clean all the food off of it and then you'd wipe it down with water out of the bucket because they didn't have running water. They didn't have sinks. Laura and Mary helped Ma with the work. Every morning there were dishes to wipe. Mary wiped more of them than Laura because she was bigger, but Laura always wiped carefully her own little cup and plate. And this is them making their bed. I'm having a really hard time because I have a really bright light on, so let me turn the light down so I can show you the picture maybe. Also, my dogs are fighting each other behind me while I'm trying to read. Here we go. There, now you can see it. Dun, dun, dun. By the time the dishes were all wiped and set away, the trundle bed was aired. Then, standing one on each side, Laura and Mary straightened the covers, tucked them in well at the foot and the sides, plumped up the pillows, and put them in place. Then Ma pushed the trundle bed into its place under the big bed. So a trundle bed is a bed that goes underneath a larger bed. My brother had one when he was a boy, and so when friends came over, we'd pull this drawer. It was like a drawer underneath his bed, and it had a mattress in the drawer. And so you pulled the drawer out, and then his friend could sleep in the bed that pulled out from under his bed. And so a trundle bed is just a smaller bed that slides under a bigger adult bed. And the reason why they had a trundle bed is because their house is small. And so in order for them to have room in their house, they don't want to have beds everywhere. So the little bed tucks underneath the bigger one and makes more room. Then Ma pushed the trundle bed into its place under the big bed. After this was done, Ma began the work that belonged to each day. Each day had its own proper work. Ma used to say, wash on Monday, iron on Tuesday, mend on Wednesday, churn on Thursday, clean on Friday, bake on Saturday, rest on Sunday. Laura liked the churning and the baking days best of all the week. In winter, the cream was not yellow as it was in summer, and butter churned from it was white and not so pretty. Ma liked everything on her table to be pretty, so in the winter time she colored the butter. So I apologize to you now. If we were in class, we would be making butter. I would make you some Johnny cake to put your butter on, and we would make butter. We cheat a little bit in class. We would use small glass jars, and we would follow Ma's recipe exactly, except we wouldn't use a butter churn. We would use small glass jars that have little carrots in them, um, and we'd shake them, shake, 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 and it makes cream, or it makes butter once you put the cream in the jars. After she had put the cream in the tall crockery churn and set it near the stove to warm, she washed and scraped a long orange-colored carrot. Then she grated it on the bottom of an old leaky tin pan that Pa had punched full of nail holes for her. Ma rubbed the carrot across the roughness until she had rubbed it all through the holes, and then when she lifted up the pan, there was a soft, juicy mound of grated carrot. So we do that in class too. I get a carrot and I grate it. I use a grater though. I don't use the lid of a tin can. And I grate the carrot, and then we add a little bit of milk to the carrot, and I put it in the classroom microwave, and then we heat it up a little bit, and then we pour it into each one of the jars that has cream in it. She put this in a little pan of milk on the stove, and when the milk was hot, she poured milk and carrot into a cloth bag. Then she squeezed the bright yellow milk into the churn, where it colored all the cream. Now the butter would be yellow. Laura and Mary were allowed to eat the carrot after the milk had been squeezed out. Mary thought she ought to have the larger share because she was older, and Laura said she should have it because she was littler, but Ma said they must divide it evenly. It was very good. When the cream was ready, Ma scalded the long wooden churn dash and put it in the churn and dropped the wooden churn cover over it. The churn cover had a little round hole in the middle, and Ma moved the dash up and down through the hole. She churned for a long time. Mary could sometimes churn while Ma rested, but the dash was too heavy for Laura. So this is what a butter churn looks like. You can see the little hole that's in the top. You push that up and down, up and down, up and down, and there's like a paddle on the inside of the crock of the jar, and the paddle moves the cream around and stirs it around and makes it turn into solid butter. At first, the splashes of cream showed thick and smooth around the little hole. After a long time, they began to look grainy. Then Ma churned more slowly, and on the dash there began to appear tiny grains of yellow butter. When Ma took off the churn cover, there was the butter in a golden lump, drowning in the buttermilk. Then Ma took out the lump with the wooden paddle into a wooden bowl, and she washed it many, many times in cold water, turning it over and over and working it with the paddle until the water ran clear. After that, she salted it. Ooh, I love when we make butter in class because I like lots of salt in my butter, and so I go crazy with the salt. So yummy. Now came the best part of the churning. Mom molded the butter. On the loose bottom of the wooden butter mold was carved the picture of a strawberry with 2 strawberry leaves. With the paddle, Ma packed butter tightly into the mold until it was full. Then she turned it upside down over a plate and pushed on the handle of the loose bottom. The little firm pad of golden butter came out, with the strawberry and its leaves molded on the top. Laura and Mary watched, breathless, one on each side of Ma, while the golden little butter pats, each with its strawberry on the top, dropped onto the plate as Ma put all the butter through the mold. Then Ma gave them each a drink of good, fresh buttermilk. On Saturdays, when Ma made the bread, they each had a little piece of dough to make into a little loaf. So, when you were a little kid in the 1800s, your job, if you were a little girl, was to learn from your mom all of the things that you were going to have to know how to do. And you would learn from your dad all of the things that you needed to do if you were a boy and for when you grew up, right? So they're not going to school. You notice that they're in the middle of the woods. There's no school. Ma is probably teaching them how to read, and then every single day they're learning important things from their mom of that they're going to need to know how to do, like to make butter. They might have a bit of cookie dough too to make little cookies, and once Laura even made a pie in her patty pan. After the day's work was done, Ma sometimes cut paper dolls for them. She cut the dolls out of stiff white paper and drew the faces with a pencil. Then from bits of colored paper she cut dresses and hats, ribbons and laces, so that Laura and Mary could dress their dolls beautifully. But the best time of all was at night when Pa came home. He would come in from his tramping through the snowy woods with tiny icicles hanging on the ends of his mustache. He would hang his gun on the wall over the door, throw off his fur cap and coat and mittens, and call, "Where's my little half pint of sweet cider half drunk up?" That was Laura, because she was so small. Laura and Mary would run to climb on his knees and sit while he warmed himself by the fire, and then he would put on his coat and cap and mittens again and go out to do the chores and bring in plenty of wood for the fire. And we are going to stop right there. So today we learned how to make butter out of cream. If you want to experiment and make it at your house, all you have to do is when you go to the store, you buy a little pint of, or you could buy a quart of heavy whipping cream, and you sprinkle a little salt in, and you put it in a jar, and you can put little baby carrots in the jar. They help to stir it up. You shake the jar. Probably takes about, I would say about 25 to 30 minutes of heavy shaking, like you have to shake it the whole time. And slowly you start to see a thick ball of butter inside the jar. And then you pour out the buttermilk, and you've got yourself some butter. If you want to make it yellow like Ma did, you grate a carrot, boil it in some milk, and then strain that because you don't want any carrot in your butter. Strain it out and then pour the milk. The milk's kind of orange colored into the jar, and it will turn your butter yellow. It's very cool. All right, we will learn some more things. So far, we've learned a lot about getting food ready for the winter, right? And we'll continue to learn more things about that pretty soon. Anyhow, I will talk to you later.